I answered the phone on the third ring. It was 3:47 inches the morning, and in 63 years, I've learned that calls at this hour never bring good news. Hello? Static crackled through the line. Then a woman's voice, professional but urgent. Is this William Garrison? Speaking. Mr. Garrison, my name is Patricia Chen. I'm a social worker at St. Paul's Hospital in Vancouver. I'm calling about your daughter. My hand tightened on the phone. My daughter? Yes, sir. Jennifer. She's here, and she's asking for you. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, my wife stirring beside me. That's impossible, I said. The words came out flat, mechanical. My daughter died 31 years ago. There was a pause. Mr. Garrison, I understand this must be shocking, but the woman here has identification. She says she's Jennifer Garrison. She has a birthmark on her left shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon. She says you used to call it her lucky moon when she was little. I stopped breathing. Nobody knew about that. Nobody except family. We'd never mentioned it in any missing person reports, never told the police. It was our private thing, something I'd made up when Jenny was 3 years old, terrified of the dark. Mr. Garrison? I'm here. My voice cracked. Where did you say she is? St. Paul's Hospital, the psychiatric unit. She was brought in 2 days ago after a crisis intervention. She's stable now, but she's asking for you. She says she finally knows who she is. I looked at the clock. 3:49 a.m. Vancouver was a 4-hour drive from Kelowna. 5 if I hit traffic. I'm on my way. I hung up before she could say anything else, before I could think too hard about what I was doing, before 31 years of grief could talk me out of it. My wife Margaret was awake now, watching me with that careful expression she gets when she thinks I'm about to do something reckless. Who was that? Someone says they found Jenny. She sat up straight. Bill, I know. I was already pulling on my jeans, grabbing yesterday's shirt from the chair. I know how it sounds. But she knew about the birthmark, Maggie. She knew about the lucky moon. Margaret's face went pale. We'd had calls before, over the years, twice in the first decade. Con artists, mostly. People who'd read about our missing daughter and thought they could exploit a grieving family. We'd learned to spot them quickly. They always got the details wrong. But the lucky moon. That was different. I'm coming with you, Margaret said, already reaching for her clothes. No. I said it more gently than I felt. Not yet. Let me see first. If it's real, I'll call you immediately. If it's not. I couldn't finish that sentence. If it's not, I'll fall apart, and I need you to be here, solid and whole, so I have something to come back to. She understood. After 42 years of marriage, she always understood. The drive to Vancouver was the longest 4 hours of my life. I'd made this trip hundreds of times, but never like this. Never with this terrible, fragile hope burning in my chest like a live coal. I kept the radio off. I needed silence to think, to remember, to prepare myself for whatever I was about to find. Jennifer had been 17 when she disappeared. December 14th, 1993. She'd gone to a friend's house after school, or that's what she'd told us. We'd found out later she'd actually gone to meet a boy. Not the boy we thought she was dating, some clean-cut kid from her physics class, but an older guy, 23, worked at a garage on the east side. They'd had a fight. He'd left her at a bus stop on Hastings Street at 11 p.m., angry and alone in one of the worst parts of the city. She'd never come home. For 3 years, we'd searched. Put up posters. Worked with police. Hired private investigators we couldn't afford. Margaret stopped sleeping. I stopped everything that wasn't work or searching. Our marriage nearly collapsed under the weight of it. Then in 1996, they'd found remains. Female, approximately 17 to 19 years old, found in a wooded area outside Mission. Dental records were inconclusive. The body had been there too long, the damage too extensive. But there was other evidence. A jacket that looked like the one Jenny had been wearing. A silver ring that might have been hers. The forensics team said they were 70% certain. 70% had been enough. We'd held a memorial service, buried an empty casket, tried to move on. But some days, I even convinced myself I had. I reached Vancouver just after 8 in the morning. St. Paul's Hospital sat in the downtown core, a sprawling complex I'd driven past 1,000 times without really seeing it. Now, it loomed in front of me, massive and indifferent. I found parking, walked through the main entrance, asked for Patricia Chen at the information desk. She met me in the lobby 15 minutes later. Late 30s, kind eyes, the sort of face that had seen too much suffering and somehow remained compassionate anyway. "Mr. Garrison, thank you for coming so quickly." She shook my hand. "I want to prepare you before you see her. Jennifer has been through significant trauma. She's had what we believe is a dissociative episode triggered by recovered memories. She's been living under a different name for the past 3 decades. "What name?" "Melissa Morrison. She's been in Vancouver the whole time, Mr. Garrison, working various jobs, mostly in the service industry. She's been homeless intermittently. 3 days ago she saw a poster, one of the old missing person posters for Jennifer Garrison. Someone had shared it on social media, part of a cold case awareness campaign. When she saw the photo, something broke open. We walked through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and floor polish. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might collapse. She's been having flashbacks," Patricia continued, "fragments of memory. A house with blue shutters, a mother who made cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings, a father who built her a treehouse but was afraid of heights himself, so she had to climb up first to test if it was safe." I stopped walking. The treehouse. I'd forgotten about the treehouse. It had been in our backyard in our old house, the one we'd sold after Jenny disappeared because we couldn't stand to look at her empty room anymore. I'd built it the summer she turned 9. She'd laughed herself sick watching me shake on the ladder, gripping the rungs so tight my knuckles went white. "Mr. Garrison?" "The treehouse," I said. "I built it. I was terrified of heights." Patricia's expression shifted. "Then you should know, before we go in, that she's scared too. She's scared you'll be angry, scared you'll blame her for disappearing, scared you won't believe her, or worse, that you will believe her and won't want her back after all these years. That's insane. Trauma isn't rational." She stopped outside a door marked 412. "She's in here. I'll give you some privacy, but I'll be right outside if you need anything." She pushed the door open. The room was small. Standard hospital setup: bed, chair, window, with blinds half drawn. A woman sat in the chair by the window, backlit by morning sun so I couldn't see her face clearly at first. She stood up when I entered, slowly, like her legs might not hold her. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She was older, of course. 48 now, not 17. Her hair was shorter than Jenny's had been, darker, streaked with premature gray. She was too thin, her face lined with years I hadn't witnessed. She wore donated clothes, sweatpants, and a faded t-shirt, and stood with her shoulders hunched, like she was trying to make herself smaller. But her eyes were Jenny's eyes. The same unusual color, gray-blue with flecks of green. The same way of looking at you, direct and slightly defiant, even when she was scared. "Dad?" The word broke me open. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times in the first years after she disappeared. In my imagination, I'd always been strong, calm, the pillar she could lean on. Instead, I stood there shaking, tears streaming down my face, unable to form words. She took a hesitant step forward. I don't remember everything yet, but I remember you. I remember the treehouse. I remember you teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway, how you ran behind me for 3 hours even though your back was killing you. I remember the way you'd read me Narnia books before bed, doing all the different voices. Jenny, I don't know if I can be her again. Her voice cracked. I don't know if I'm still that person. I've been someone else for so long. I closed the distance between us in 3 steps, pulled her into my arms. She was stiff at first, uncertain, then collapsed against me like a puppet with cut strings. She smelled wrong, not like my daughter, not like the girl who'd used strawberry shampoo and worn too much of her mother's perfume. She smelled like hospital soap and fear and decades of hard living. But when I closed my eyes, I could feel the shape of her, the way her head fit against my shoulder, the way she'd always been tall for her age, almost as tall as me by the time she was 15. "You're alive," I whispered. "You're alive. That's all that matters." We stood there for a long time. Eventually, we Saturday. She in the chair, me on the edge of the hospital bed. And slowly, haltingly, she began to tell me what she remembered. The night she'd disappeared, she'd gotten off the bus at Hastings in Maine. She'd been crying, angry at the boyfriend, angry at herself for lying to us, angry at the whole world. She'd started walking, not really paying attention to where she was going. Someone had approached her. A woman. Friendly, concerned. Asked if she was okay, offered to buy her coffee, get her somewhere safe. Everything after that was fragments. Scattered pieces of a nightmare she'd locked away so completely that for 31 years she hadn't even known it was real. There'd been other girls. A house that moved, or maybe they'd been moved to different houses, she wasn't sure. Years of dissociation, of being Melissa Morrison, a girl who'd appeared in the system with fabricated papers and a fabricated history. Years of survival work, of doing what she had to do to eat, to sleep, to stay alive. The memories had been coming back in pieces over the past 5 years, she said. Little things that didn't fit the narrative of her life. A feeling that Melissa Morrison wasn't her real name. Dreams about a house with blue shutters. About a mother's cinnamon rolls. About a father who was afraid of heights. But it wasn't until she'd seen the poster 3 days ago, her own 17-year-old face staring back at her from a social media share, that everything had come crashing down. "I lost myself," she said. "Completely. Patricia says it was a psychotic break, but it felt more like waking up. Like I'd been asleep for 31 years, and suddenly I remembered I was supposed to be someone else." I listened. I didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just let her talk. Some of what she said made sense. Some of it was confused, fragmented, the way trauma memories often are. But through it all, there were details. Small, specific things that no con artist could have known. The way I always burned the popcorn on movie nights. The scar on her knee from when she'd fallen off her bike at age 7 trying to impress the neighbor boy. The stupid argument we'd had the week before she disappeared about her curfew, how I'd said she was grounded and she'd screamed that she hated me, and those had been the last words we'd ever spoken to each other. "I didn't hate you," she said. "I need you to know that. I was 17 and stupid, but I didn't hate you. I know." My throat was so tight I could barely speak. "I know, sweetheart. I know." There was a knock on the door. Patricia came in, apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jennifer needs to rest. And Mr. Garrison, there are some things we need to discuss, practical matters." We stepped into the hallway. Patricia kept her voice low. "We'll need to do a DNA test to confirm her identity, though given what you've told me, I don't think there's much doubt. The police will want to interview her, obviously. There's a trafficking task force that's going to be very interested in her case. And she'll need extensive therapy, Mr. Garrison. She's had what amounts to a complete identity collapse. The integration process will take months, maybe years. Whatever she needs, there's something else." Patricia hesitated. "The remains you buried in 1996, we'll need to re-examine them. If Jennifer is alive, then someone else's daughter is in that grave. Someone else's family deserves to know the truth." I'd been so focused on Jenny being alive that I hadn't thought about that. The implications hit me like a fist to the gut. For 31 years we'd mourned her, but somewhere out there, another family might still be searching, waiting for news that would never come, because we'd taken their daughter's body and called it ours. "I'll contact the police," I said. "Today. We'll do whatever needs to be done." Patricia nodded. "I need to ask you something difficult, Mr. Garrison. Are you prepared for this? Not just today, but long term. Jennifer isn't the girl you lost. She may never fully be that girl again. She's a 48-year-old woman with 3 decades of trauma and survival skills that might be hard for you to understand or accept. This won't be a simple reunion. She's my daughter." The words came out fierce. "I don't care who she had to become to survive. I don't care what she's done or what was done to her. She's my daughter, and I've had 31 years to grieve her. I'm not wasting another second." I called Margaret from the hospital parking lot, told her everything. She was in the car before I'd finished talking, wouldn't be talked out of coming, and I was grateful. I needed her strength, needed her certainty. The DNA test took 10 minutes to administer and 2 weeks to process. Those were the longest 2 weeks of my life. Longer than the first 2 weeks after Jenny disappeared, because back then I'd still had hope without complication. Now I had hope tangled up with fear and guilt and a desperate, clawing need for this to be real. Margaret and I visited the hospital every day. Jenny, she wanted to be called Jenny now, said Melissa Morrison needed to be put away, was slowly becoming more present. The dissociative episodes were less frequent. She remembered more each day. She remembered her mother's cinnamon rolls, remembered the blue shutters on our old house, remembered the cat we'd had, Winston, who died when she was 15. She also remembered things we couldn't verify, things from the missing 31 years. Some of them made Margaret cry, made me want to tear the world apart with my bare hands, but we listened. We bore witness, because that's what she needed. The DNA results came back on a Tuesday. Patricia called me into her office to deliver the news, even though we all already knew what it would say. "It's a match, Mr. Garrison. Jennifer is your daughter." I nodded, couldn't speak, just nodded. "There's more. The police have reopened the investigation into the 1,996 remains. They've been able to extract DNA, and they've run it through the national database. They've found a match. The girl in the grave was Rebecca Kim. She went missing from Surrey in 1995. Her family has been notified." Another family, I thought. Another father who'd spent decades not knowing. At least now they would have answers. At least now they could bury their real daughter, say real goodbyes. It didn't make what happened to Rebecca okay. Nothing could make that okay. But maybe it gave her family something. Some small measure of peace. Jenny came home 3 weeks after that first call. Not to the house Margaret and I had, now a condo in Kelowna, downsized after the kids left home, but to a small apartment we helped her rent in Vancouver. She wasn't ready to leave the city yet. Needed to be close to her therapy team, to Patricia, to the world she knew as Melissa Morrison, even as she slowly let that identity go. We helped her furnish it. Margaret bought her dishes and towels and a comfortable chair. I built her a bookshelf, teasing her about how I still wasn't any good with a hammer after all these years. She smiled at that. A small, fragile smile, but real. Our sons came to meet her. That was hard. David and Michael had been 14 and 11 when their big sister disappeared. They remembered her, but their memories were childhood memories, unreliable and rose-tinted. The woman they met now was a stranger who happened to share their DNA. But they tried. They brought photos, helped fill in gaps in her memory. David told her about his kids, her niece and nephew she'd never met. Michael told her about his job, his husband, the life he'd built. She cried during those visits, mourned the decades she'd lost with them, the relationship they might have had. But slowly, carefully, we built something new. The police investigation into what happened to Jenny was ongoing. She'd been able to give them some details, though many of her memories were still fragmented. There'd been a trafficking ring, they told us, based in the downtown East Side, operating for decades. Most of the original perpetrators were dead or in prison for other crimes, but the task force was following every lead. Jenny testified in closed session. Margaret and I waited outside, holding hands, while our daughter relived the worst moments of her life in service of justice. Afterward, she'd come out shaking. We'd taken her for coffee, her new thing. She drank coffee constantly, needed the warmth and the ritual of it, and sat with her while she processed. "I thought I'd feel better," she'd said. "Telling them everything. I thought it would help. Does it?" "I don't know yet." She'd wrapped her hands around her mug, staring into the dark liquid. "Maybe. Ask me in a year." That had been 4 months ago. It was March now. The cherry blossoms were starting to bloom in Vancouver, and Jenny had called to ask if we wanted to visit. We did. Always. She met us at the door of her apartment, and I was struck by how different she looked. She'd gained weight, a good thing, Margaret kept saying. She'd been dangerously thin when we'd found her. Her hair had grown out, showed more of the auburn color I remembered from her childhood. She wore jeans and a sweater that actually fit her, not the donated clothes from the hospital. She looked more like herself. Not the 17-year-old who'd disappeared, and not entirely Melissa Morrison either. Someone new, someone who was learning to be both. "I made coffee," she said. Then, almost shyly, and I tried to make cinnamon rolls. Mom's recipe! I had to call her 3 times to get it right, and they're definitely not as good as hers. But they'll be perfect, Margaret said, pulling her into a hug. We sat at her small kitchen table, eating slightly overdone cinnamon rolls that tasted like forgiveness, like second chances, like all the Saturday mornings we'd never had but might still get. Jenny told us she'd been approved for vocational training, wanted to study to be a social worker, work with trafficking survivors, wanted to take her nightmare and turn it into something that might help someone else. I thought about how proud I was of her. This woman who'd survived the unsurvivable, who'd lost herself and found her way back, who was choosing to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past. I've been thinking about the treehouse, she said suddenly. Do you remember, Dad? How scared you were of heights. I remember. Why did you build it if you were so afraid? I looked at her across the table, at this daughter who'd been dead and was alive, who'd been lost and was found, who'd been Melissa, and was Jenny, and was herself. Because you wanted one, I said simply. Because you were mine, and I would have climbed Everest if you'd asked me to. She smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. That's good, she said, because I think I might need you to climb a few more mountains before we're done. Then that's what I'll do, I told her. However many mountains, however long it takes. I'm not going anywhere. And I meant it. We'd lost 31 years, we'd never get them back, but we had now, we had whatever time was left, and I intended to make every second of it count. Because my daughter had come home, not the same, not whole, not healed, but alive. And that was everything.